Welcome to the Capitol News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is June 26, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope everyone out there is doing well today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the nut house. The Democrats debate. Take one, and of course, take two will take place tomorrow evening. So we had basically half of the Democratic Party's presidential field for the 2020 presidential election debating today on NBC. So who was up there for take one? Well, we had Senator Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas. We had Cory Booker, I Am Spartacus. We had Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Congressman Tim Ryan. We had former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, former Congressman John Delaney, Julian Castro, a former member of the Obama administration, Mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, and a couple others were up there too. Okay. This is better, and I mean this is better than it was in 2016, where you basically had the coronation of Queen Hillary Clinton. That's un-American. Nobody even wanted to run against her. Of course, Crazy Bernie doesn't care. He was doing it. So, I mean, you have to applaud Bernie in that regard. Because if it wasn't for Bernie Sanders, nobody else was going to be on that stage. I mean, there might have been one governor, who was it, O'Malley from Maryland, who was up on the stage. I mean, he got booted off. There was no way anybody was going to overtake Hillary Clinton. Of course, if it was free and fair, Crazy Bernie might have had her. But that's not the system in which we live in. That's definitely not the system in which the DNC allows their operations to partake, because you have these superdelegates which can just go wherever they want. So, I mean, their system is different than the Republican system. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, especially those of you who may be joining for the first time, I don't have a dog in this hunt. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I consider myself a libertarian. I'm down the middle. If I like what somebody says, I say so. If I disagree with them, I say so. Now, there were some good comments here from a handful of these candidates. I mean, I know I playfully joke around calling these people lunatics. In some instances, they are. All you have to do is look at them straight in the eye. You see that something isn't right behind the wheel. So a lot of topics were discussed. There was a technical glitch. NBC, some of the crew, their microphones were on, so you were actually able to hear what some of the staff was saying behind the scenes. They cut to break. I'm sure the president is going to make fun of that if he hasn't already. I wasn't on my Twitter feed paying attention to seeing if the president and or his team were live tweeting the event. To be perfectly honest with you, I really don't care. But I'm sure as I make my way through my Twitter feed tomorrow, I will see some things, and I'm sure we will hear about it in the news tomorrow as well. The president is actually traveling to Osaka, Japan today, to partake in the G20 meeting this weekend. And of course, we're going to keep you updated on that, because that will be a big event. That is going to be market moving. This is coming to a head. What is going to transpire at the G20? But I don't want to get off topic. So back to the Democrats and their debate. So it's difficult, obviously, with that many people on stage to have a real good back and forth. You have questions that are going to be fielded maybe only by one or two candidates, and then you have to move on to somebody else. It's very difficult. This is very reminiscent of what transpired during the Republican nominating process back in 2012, when there was a slew of Republicans running for president. But again, this is better than what it was back in 2016 with basically the coronation of Queen Hillary Clinton. So, of course, some of the topics that were discussed were health care, which led to the discussion of Medicare for all. We discussed immigration. They discussed, is the United States of America supposed to be the policeman of the world? They slightly touched on student debt and a whole host of some other issues, but that's what we're going to focus on here, because there's nothing new. There was not any breaking news. This was a good introduction for some of the, let's just call them, lower-level candidates to get out there, have their voices be heard, and I think a couple of them probably stood out. I think former Congressman from Maryland, John Delaney, very well spoken, articulate, former entrepreneur, former congressman, so he has a little bit of the business world experience. He has the political experience to understand the legislative process, and I think is more or less one of the most commonsensical on the stage. Now, whether that's enough to get enough attention and with it enough dollars to promote himself and to get closer and closer to the middle of the stage, because of course, that's how they rank the candidates. If you're at center stage, you have higher polling numbers. If you're at the fringe, maybe you're only getting 1%. Well, that is where former Congressman John Delaney was. And on the other wing, you have Mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio. So John Delaney, I think, scored some points, at least with me, from the standpoint of me looking at this from the perspective of a Democrat. But quite honestly, just simply as an American, too, as somebody who is being a spectator to this, who makes sense, who's in left field, and who's not even in the ballpark. I do have to say, however, I think everybody was actually in the ballpark today. Yes, their policies are not good, but nobody really went off the rails. Even Pocahontas, I think, was actually pretty formidable. She was able to debate very well. Same thing with Cory Booker. Yes, I poke fun at them all the time and will continue to do so because they deserve it, to be perfectly honest with you, as does President Trump. So again, this isn't one-sided here. I go after everybody. So, free health care. This is interesting because obviously the question that came up was, well, do you support Medicare for all? Most of the candidates did, but not all of them. Interestingly, again, I have to go back to John Delaney because he stated something. We'll have to fact check this, but it was an interesting statement that he made in regards to Medicare for all. He was against it. He wants Medicare to exist, but he also wants private insurance to exist. And the statement that he made was in regards to hospital administrators. And he asked them a question. He said, if you just simply received the standard payout from Medicare across the entire board, so meaning even if you have private insurance, a hybrid system between Medicare and private insurers, but the private insurers actually paid the same rate that Medicare does, what would happen? And the hospital administrators, according to John Delaney, said we'd go out of business. We'd have to close down. So that ain't good, ladies and gentlemen. You might have, quote-unquote, health insurance provided to you by Uncle Sam, a.k.a. you and me, the taxpayer, but where are you going to go when you're sick or there's an emergency? Because they're going to be shut down. This is exactly what happens when you have people trying to control 17% of the United States economy, because that's how much we spend here in the United States of America on health care or health-related services and products. It's outrageous. I don't care if the number's 10%. 5%, the government is not to be involved. We go over this here all the time for a very simple reason. The Republicans aren't always going to be in power. The Democrats are not always going to be in power. This then means that they will use healthcare, your healthcare and your health, more importantly, as a political football. It's going to go back and forth, back and forth. This is divide and conquer. This does not work. It does not make sense. You want Medicare for all? You have less choice. You only have one choice. I thought the Democratic Party was the party of choice. Isn't that what we always say? Everybody has to have a choice. We're for women's rights, women's choice. They get to choose. But not for medical care. Not for everybody else. For those reproductive rights, quote-unquote rights, you can choose all day long. But for everybody else, when it just comes to general insurance, nope, you got one choice. It's going to be Uncle Sam. My way or the highway, and that's it. That makes no sense whatsoever. You have no competition. You're going to get a poorer product, poorer service, poorer quality, and you will have higher costs. Now, of course, it may not transpire down the road to actual out-of-pocket costs if Uncle Sam is at the helm. But your taxes will be going up. There ain't no doubt about it. Right now, I'm looking at the U.S. debt clock. And of course, we talk about this all the time. One of the key drivers of our $22.4 trillion national debt is spending on Medicare and Medicaid. Currently, on an annual basis, we're spending $1.2 trillion. Yes, $1.2 trillion, trillion with a T. And it's going to go insolvent within a decade. This isn't me saying this. This is the government saying this. And now somehow, some way, these presidential contenders think that having Medicare for all is somehow going to solve this problem. It will not solve this problem. It will not. You hear about a whole bunch of long waiting lines in other countries around the world who have quote-unquote universal health care. You know why? Because governments have a responsibility to manage their pocketbook. Now, of course, we don't do that very well here, which is par for the course with any government. Another reason why they should not be at the helm on this. And so many other things. But the reason you have so many waiting lines is because the government comes in and it starts to dictate salaries. It tells doctors what you're going to be paid. And if you go in to general medicine, a family practitioner, they're going to hamstring you. They're going to keep you down. Maybe they're going to say, well, you know what, you're just a family practitioner. You're only going to be able to make $80,000. It cost you $500,000 to go to school. When you come out, we're only going to let you make $80,000 a year. Hypothetically. Well, nobody's going to go tack on $500,000 worth of debt to come out making $80,000. You don't have to be a genius to figure that one out. But the government may give a higher pay or allow for it if you're a specialist. So everybody will go become a specialist. And that's what happens. That's why you have people who are just, you hear the horror stories all the time. It's just a cold, it's a flu, it's a little thing, but I have to wait. I have to wait. There's nowhere to go. Why? Because the government starts to come in and they start to dictate how much somebody can be paid. Doesn't work like that, folks. Free market capitalism. Let the market solve the problem. It will. It will. We don't have free market capitalism. And that, of course, was attacked today by the Democratic contenders for the presidency. Some of them want to say that they're saving capitalism. They're going to do it. They don't understand the word. And you always have to say it free market capitalism. You have to, because that's what the system is. There's always capital. The movement of capital is capitalism. How does it move is the question. China has capital, but it's controlled by the state. You want free market capitalism, for capital to move freely. We don't have that here in the United States of America. Newsflash for you. We don't. Not even close. So there's a lot of issues here. The Democrats are supposed to be the party of choice, yet they only want to give you one choice for health care, government-run health care. It will not work. If you think it will, spin a globe, stop your finger on any other country. They probably have it, or something a lot more similar to universal health care as opposed to what we have here. Although what we have here is not the best either. Because again, this is not truly free market capitalism. If we did have a free market in our healthcare space, it would be fantastic, because that's what entrepreneurs do every single day. Just look around you right now. You have a computer screen in front of you. You have a phone in your pocket. Maybe you're listening to music on fancy headphones. I mean, everything around you, your TV, your lazy boy recliner, a comfortable couch, the clothes you're wearing, all entrepreneurs. This didn't come from Uncle Sam. This didn't come from government bureaucrats and politicians. They solve the problems. That's how it works. If they don't solve a problem, they go out of business. Of course, we talk about this too all the time, particularly on the economic podcast, especially as of late, because we've been talking about zombie corporations that are walking around. Why? Because the government needs to intervene to quote-unquote save everybody, as opposed to allowing the system to work itself out. That's how free market capitalism works. When you get in there and you start meddling with things, and you start pulling on different levers, thinking you're smarter than everybody else, this is what happens. $22.4 trillion in debt and counting, Medicare and Medicaid going insolvent within a decade, Social Security following it, not too far behind, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, one of the other things that was brought up today was, is the United States to be the policeman of the world? Most of the candidates said yes. I was surprised by this answer from the Democrats, to be perfectly honest with you. Nevertheless, and we talked about Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii before on a previous podcast, given her interview with Joe Rogan, and I highly recommend you check out that podcast with Joe Rogan and Tulsi Gabbard. I also highly recommend Joe Rogan. He's the king of podcasts. Very interesting guy, great questioner, great interviewer, allows his guests to do the talking, and he has great guests all over the place. So check that out. I do highly recommend it. But Tulsi Gabbard, Congresswoman from Hawaii, member of the National Guard, served overseas, she said no, that the United States is not to be the policeman of the world. And I am in agreement with Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. We don't have the money. How many more of our sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters do we want to send to fight somebody else's problem? That's not in the Constitution. These soldiers, sailors, and Marines are here to serve and protect the Constitution of the United States. Where does it say in the Constitution that we are the policemen of the world? It's not there. I'll save you the time. It's not there. We fought our revolution. If people around the world have their issues, their struggles, well, then they have to fight theirs. Can we do things diplomatically? Of course we can. Can we build coalitions with other countries to put pressure on poor behavior, evil behavior? Of course we can. But unfortunately, we live in a dark and twisted world. There's a lot of light. There's also a lot of righteousness. That's the yin and the yang of this thing. There's always good if you go looking for it. There's always bad and evil if you go looking for it too. So if we're supposed to be the policemen of the world, I mean, we're going to be busy every single day. How do you pick and choose who's more important? I think if you're supposed to be the president of the United States, if you're going to be the commander-in-chief, your responsibility, your obligation is to the American people. And as tragic as it may be, if there is some sort of genocide or some sort of battle, civil war somewhere else around the world, it is not our job. It is not the duty of the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, to say, saddle up, Marines. You got to go over there and fight somebody else's battle. It's not how it works. At least, not in my opinion. They're here to protect this country. This country. So I have to again salute Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Now, her stance on a whole host of other things, I am in total disagreement with. She's for Medicare for all. She might, be wishy-washy and say, well, there could be a hybrid back and forth. Because again, going back to former Congressman John Delaney, I think he shocked a lot of people with his response, which was commonsensical. Let's actually ask the people who deal with this stuff. Let's ask the hospital administrators. Let's ask the people who have to deal with Medicare and private insurance, what do they think the solution is? That's the entrepreneur in that gentleman. That's how you know he was successful, because you ask the people on the ground level, what's going on? And then you start to solve the problem. You don't sit on high in your chair and just think you're a super genius. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. Again, another reason why we have $22.4 trillion in national debt and counting. Because people sit in their fancy chairs and they think they know everything. They don't. Ask some questions. Don't just read the headlines. Dig beneath the surface. Look under the hood. Use your God-given gifts of logic and common sense. Of course, common sense, unfortunately, is not common. But nevertheless, do your best. What else do we have? We had some minor discussion. The candidates brought it up in some of their answers. Nothing really head-on as far as student debt was concerned. At least nothing that really stood out from what we already discuss here on a daily basis if we happen to talk about the Democrats. Yeah, they want free college education. Free public college education. Yeah, there could be debt forgiveness. I mean, What type of moral hazard does this cause? Simply meaning, if you really believe that the government is going to forgive your student tax or student debt burden, then wouldn't you saddle up and go to school right now? Wouldn't you just try to get in anywhere possible? And what difference does it make what the cost is? Because it's going to be forgiven. You want to go get a master's degree? Go get one. You want to go get a second bachelor's? Go get it. You want to go get your first bachelor's degree? Go get it in whatever you want. Whatever you want to study, go do it, because the Democrats are going to forgive it. And boom, it's just going to wash away like it was never there. Nobody's going to have to pay that nothing. You have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, somebody else's debt is somebody else's asset. So this is not a zero-sum game here. Somebody will lose. I do not like the system that we have, but guess who's running it? Oh, yeah, that's right, the government. The government is running the student loan system, guaranteeing these loans, in effect, if not outright giving them to students and families. And of course, we're at $1.5, $1.6 trillion and counting. That is $1 trillion more than where we were during the Great Recession, by the way. So, not too bad. Just $1 trillion over the course of a decade. Nothing, you can sneeze at that. That's not a problem at all. Because it's just going to be forgiven. Makes no sense whatsoever, but here we are. So again, just to wrap this thing up, the Democrats debate take one. Tomorrow night we were going to have crazy Bernie, Kamala Harris, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, and a host of others. We will see what comes of it. But I think, again, this is a lot better than what we saw in 2016, where it was the coronation of Queen Hillary Clinton, and you only had the Lone Ranger, crazy Bernie Sanders up there. And again, he could have won. He could have beaten her, but the odds were stacked against him. The whole system was stacked against Bernie. There was no way he was going to get it. That's just not how the Clintons play. It's not how the Democrats play. And that's not a pass for the Republicans either. They play dirty too. But nevertheless, that's where we are. We'll have to see what comes of it. We want more voices out there in the public. We don't want this to be the coronation of Bernie Sanders. We don't want this to be the coronation of Joe Biden or anybody else for that matter. We want Americans to hear what these candidates have to say, base their decisions on common sense, reason, logic, what will actually work, what actually makes sense, who has the experience and wherewithal, who has the energy and the passion for this country to lead it. It could be a Democrat. Maybe it will be Donald Trump. But this is the United States of America. It is our decision. And this is the Capitol News. I am Alex Kouraitis. Godspeed.